Aloha, everybody, and welcome to Elephants in Our Rooms. And I'm your host, Janet Care Lessin, with my co-host, Deborah DeFranco, and we have our guest, Steve Bhaerman. And he's an internationally known author, humorist, and workshop leader. For over 33 years, he has written and performed as Swami Beyondananda, the cosmic comic. And his comedy has been described both as comedy disguised as wisdom and wisdom disguised as comedy. And Marianne Williamson called him the Mark Twain of our generation. So today, Elephants in the Room, we talk about politics. So I'm going to turn on the mic. And 1 second here. It's taking a while to take. And bring on Deborah DeFranco. Hi, Deborah. How's the weather up there in Niagara Falls?
Cold and windy.
Slowly I turn. No, I can't say that.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I thought you know that reference.
Step by step, inch by inch. No.
Do you remember the whole thing, Steve? Do you remember what was it? It was like slowly I turn.
Turn. Step
step
by step. Inch by inch. I crept up on a man. There it goes. Yeah. It's take your pick. Abbott and Costello did it. Who else? It's a classic. Danny Thomas. It's classic. Three Stooges. Classic.
Yeah.
Classic.
I remember the Three Stooges doing it. Now, if you look back on it, it seems like they were triggered by some kind of code word, right?
Yes.
Something somebody said.
And I think that I've used that a lot as an example, a funny example of how we get triggered by things that trip a memory, and then all of a sudden we're in this trance state. Of course, the comedy is an exaggeration of it, but we've all been hijacked in a slowly I turn moment.
Wow. And that's probably what's going on right now with this generation of people.
Well, it's interesting. Well, the thing that I recommend, the thing that's best going to help people understand politics now, is to go to Netflix and see the documentary "The Social Dilemma." Have you seen it, either of you?
No,
I haven't.
Marking it down.
Go run and see this because it'll explain a lot. It's a documentary about the tech industry, and there's a lot of interviews with people who are pioneers in Facebook and Google and all of these other companies, and there are positive expectations about what would come about through this technology. And what really happened is that the technology, as you probably know, Facebook and Google know more about you than you know about yourself. And, it's free to be on Facebook, and it's free to use Google because the product that they're selling is you. They're selling your eyeballs, they're selling your attention, and their intention is to keep you on somebody's website for as long as possible, because that's how the ads get paid for. So they want material that's going to keep you addicted, that's going to get you emotionally bought into something so that you keep coming back. And essentially what social media has turned into is a form of addiction where people are fed back the narratives that they already believe so that they imagine that everybody thinks the way they do. And then there are these echo chambers that keep resounding, and the two sides are now living in two separate realities. It's not even that they have disagreements. They're two separate realities. Meanwhile, most people in this country, more than 70% of people, think that we're too polarized and would love to find ways to work together. But it doesn't fit into either the party narrative, political narrative, each political party, and it doesn't fit into the model, the economic model, where money is made when people are put into fear and anger and addicted. So the situation that we have right now is exacerbated by social media that allows people to have their separate reality. Now, I'm connected with people from all aspects of the political spectrum. So there are people who believe that Donald Trump won this election with 70% of the votes, and the thing was stolen, and they were cheated. And when he does leave office, they're going to be armed and ready to take Washington D.C.
I think they're going to take the whole world.
Well, but I'm saying that there are people who fervently believe that. I know people who fervently believe that. That's their truth. I think their reality check is going to bounce, but that's their truth. Meanwhile, on the other side, on the progressive side, if you really look at progressive news, if you really look at the wording of everything in mainstream media, I've come to the conclusion that it's primarily propaganda, and that instead of really allowing free speech, the cancel culture, wokeism, all of these aspects of, and of course the COVID narrative, it's all been imposed. There hasn't been any conversation about it. It's something that the media has fallen into line with one party line. And, before Donald Trump's name, they'll always put pathological liar or something like that, or the now discredited and all of these things. And I think that what's happened is that I think that the progressive side has forgotten in this notion of free speech. And they really don't like conflict, and so they would prefer that there not be any conflicting narratives to their own. And the best way to avoid conflict is to simply not allow it. So you will not hear opposing opinions on mainstream media, or only very, very slightly varying opinions. But you won't hear, for example, you won't have a mainstream program having somebody who has done research and believes that, based on his or her research, that wearing masks is ineffective, or that the hydrochloroquine is actually a valid treatment for COVID. So instead of letting people make up their own minds and treating people like adults and creating an adult conversation, the mainstream media feeds the people narratives. You could go back to the Iraq War. Everyone at the stations fell in line behind the Iraq War. They fell in line with the line that they were weapons of mass destruction. Jill Donahue on MSNBC did not fall in line. He had a differing point of view. He was fired. He was the most popular TV personality on MSNBC as of 2003. He hasn't worked in 17 years. So
let me ask you
the
a question
mainstream
there,
media.
Steve, because this is a very, has it ever been any differently? When I was a kid, and probably when you were a kid, we had NBC, ABC, CBS, and we all listened to Walter Cronkite. And what was the guy's name that was there when the Berlin Wall came down? So have we ever
Tom
had,
Brokaw?
like you said, Tom Brokaw. I remember that. That'll be. I see him, with the bricks and this coming down, right? So was there anything other? Did we ever have these dialogues? There was a show, wasn't there? One show that I don't know. I can't even remember, like, having a reality like you're talking about, when we openly.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of how things were different. Okay, in the 1970s and 1980s, I've been doing a lot of watching different points of view on vaccinations, etc. And there was a woman whose child was very clearly injured by vaccinations, And I just saw a video of her, and this was in the early 1980s. She was on a mainstream, daytime TV interview show, and she was interviewed about her experience where her child was injured by a vaccination. I guarantee you that you will not see anybody whose child was injured by a vaccination. You will not see anyone like that interviewed on mainstream TV. And this is even before the COVID thing. In 2015, the Tribeca Film Festival withdrew Vaxxed, the movie Vaxxed, and they just pulled it. And they slandered it and so on. So it's just becoming more bold. In the old days, people were more docile, but we did have more freedom to watch things. There was something called the fairness doctrine, where if you had one point of view, you had to present another point of view. But that disappeared in the 1980s or 1990s. We've also had drug companies can now advertise on TV. So my point is that things have always been divided, but it's just gotten worse. The interview I did on my Politic radio show this week, Tuesday, was with Mark Gerzon. And Mark has a movie coming out, a documentary called The Reunited States of America, where people go around the country talking with people who are actually looking to bring people together in sane dialogue. And Mark has been in mediation for many years, and in the 1990s, he was hired by the U.S. Congress to lead a retreat of Congress people from both political parties to deal with the issue of polarization. So this is 25 years ago. He was doing it. And what he said on the interview, he says, I could see we were in trouble 25 years ago. We've actually fully manifested that now to where we've gone from, these people used to socialize with one another in Congress. They'd invite each other to dinner. And that was mainly when they lived in D.C. when Congress was in session and didn't fly home. When they lived in D.C., there was much more of a camaraderie. So I think that the media has always lied when it was convenient to lie. They lied about the Kennedy assassination. They lied about the King assassination. They lied about many things, about the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam, on and on and on. But what's happened now is that those lies are becoming more important because what they've led to is a complete and utter lack of trust in the media and in the other major institutions in our society.
Okay.
So there's nothing in the center to hold us together. That's my point.
Nothing holds us together. Okay. So there's two other documentaries that we need to watch here and have a further dialogue down the line. It's called Active Measures, and I'm not sure exactly where you can watch it. I actually have to look it up. I think I went to Amazon and rented it. And so it goes back to the 80s. And, Deborah, you watched it too, correct?
Yes.
Deborah, you there? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to say what I remember. I need to rewatch it. And the other thing is, before I go to Active Measures, is The Family. And that's on Netflix. And it's a 6 or 8 part series, maybe it's less. I don't know. Can't remember. 5-part, 6-part. And it talks about how this young man went into this organization and began being indoctrinated into everything is Jesus. It's all Jesus. And then they brought that into the breakfast prayer, which Eisenhower said, we can't do this. We can't have this yearly breakfast prayer because there's supposed to be a separation of church and state. And then somehow he allowed himself to be talked into it. But that's what's behind two major things. One is family is seen only as, a man and a woman and children.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing was it was family. Oh, and so that's the BLGTQ. What's the other issue? Oh, the anti-abortion. That killing abortions is killing, and abortions cannot be under any circumstances. So basically, that's attacking. Oh no, wait. There was two issues. That's the one. The anti-abortion is. Oh, darn. Deborah, did you see it? There were two major issues that are dividing the world. They couldn't use the races because they were unifying all races, and they said all you need is Jesus. All you need is Jesus. So it was the anti-abortion, but I guess the family values attacked gay and lesbian. Yeah, that's what it was. It was those two issues. Okay, and that's what started the world eroding into this polarization. So these were absolute. You absolutely could not be gay or lesbian, and you absolutely cannot permit abortion under any circumstances. So that's the absolute. And then active measures was about how Russia and even your own country will use divide and conquer strategies to separate people so we're polarized. And the whole situation around that is, well, first of all, they destroy countries. And the United States is great at destroying countries and going in and putting in a democracy, but it's really an active measure thing. And so Trump started traveling over to visit Putin when he got in trouble financially. But Putin kind of rose up from nowhere, and he basically made himself king of Russia until, I think, 2036. So he went over hanging out with his buddy Putin, all kinds of excuses. So let's have you come over and judge Miss Universe, right? So they get to hang out together, and they plot and scheme. And it was basically, how can we erode the United States? Because Putin was so pissed off because we brought down the Berlin Wall. We divided the USSR, United Soviet Republic, into separate countries. And so Putin's goal was to get back at the United States for dividing and conquering Russia, and they've never been able to fully recover. And now, it's turnaround, fair game, and he's out to divide. So what better thing to do than launch a virus and then tell everybody don't wear masks or don't, social distance, and now there's huge amounts of people dying everywhere. We just passed the 250,000 person death mark. So I'm going to go back.
Well, there's a lot of.
Interject that.
I think that there's a lot of things out there that can't be verified, but the one thing that can be verified is that we have been divided. And, whether it's the Russians or the Republicans or the Chinese or whoever it is, or a combination of forces, we have been successfully divided. And consequently, our country is on the verge of implosion. Now, what I'm noticing, and this is, I've been talking with people who have been watching this for years, and have been watching the fact that there are extreme political narratives on both sides. And those are the narratives that get the media attention. Keep in mind that the political parties, it costs a lot of money to, I think they spent $4 billion on this election here, this last one. It costs a lot of money. And so they have to blackmail their constituents. So if you're on any of the Democrat or Republican Party mailing lists, then you get 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 emails a day asking you that what they'll do is they'll invoke whoever the villain is. On one side, it's Trump. On the other side, it might be Biden or Obama or Hillary or whatever it is, or George Soros or socialism. And what they do is they invoke the fear, and then they blackmail you to send them $3 or whatever it is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So both political parties, I mean, and again, I would have to say that the parties are equally morally bankrupt. They're bankrupt of ideas, and they're bankrupt of morality. And if you see who, and by the way, I am no Donald Trump fan. I certainly didn't vote for Trump. I recognized, I'm from New York, so I know who Donald Trump really is. He's not some secret hero like the QAnon people believe. He is exactly what he looks like, a cowardly mafioso wannabe who will do anything to serve himself and will destroy anybody and anything in his path. And those who are in bed with him, the Vici Republicans, may they go down with the ship. Okay, so that's my feeling about that side. In regards to Joe Biden, he is the ghost of Democrats' past. And if you look at who he's appointing, it's all corporate, it's all establishment, it's all trying to get back to what didn't work. You know, if you're looking back at, Obama had in 2008 a true mandate. He had a true mandate to reform. I know conservative people who voted for Obama because they thought he was going to clean up the banking system and so on, and instead he bailed out the banks. And consequently, and it didn't take very long, 2008 to 2010, he lost his majority in the Senate. Started out with 67 senators, lost that majority.
Yeah. He lost that. So we've got, it's not working. I've had this conversation with Sasha, and if he wakes up, I'll bring him into the show, but he's not working. Yeah,
not working.
It's just not working. And so we can point fingers, point this and that, and I would just like to have somebody not twittering at me every day, and someone that dominates in the news, and maybe they come on. We used to have like a what was it, the report every 3 months or 6 months. We didn't hear from the president. We might see him once in a while on a talk show, right? That's I think we're in. I have PTSD. I'm in information overload from somebody who reminds me of a 2-year-old that any attention, negative or positive, is better than none. So he's just acting out. Look at me. So I'm bored with that. But I know, our whole government, we're clinging to this sentimentality around democracy that was established, 250 years ago or 30 years ago by a bunch of men, and they were rich men and they owned land.
Oh, you're going to blame the guys now, huh?
Yeah, those guys.
Well, we didn't have the Council of Grandmothers when we stole our government system from the Iroquois Nation, and we took the balance of powers, and we took the separation of powers, and we took the Confederacy idea. We failed to adopt the Council of Grandmothers. So from the get-go, and George Carlin, in his wonderful, cynical way, he said, "Oh yeah, our country was established by a bunch of slave owners who wanted to be free." So if you can look at it that way, But to get back to
it's just another variation on a what do you call it? It's not a democracy. The president is a king, and if you look now at the absolute power this one person has, it's just King George all over again. And so we need another system where we don't have, one person have that much ability. I don't think any one person is that smart. I would like to see maybe a council
that person,
like the grandmother. Yeah, especially that. We need to qualify. I mean, we wouldn't make somebody the president of a university that was so unqualified, or the president of a company, or even the dog catcher, unless they're qualified. But we're letting everybody that just wants to be president show up, and they don't even know really what it takes to be this person that has so much power. And I think to go back to kings, they were appointed, anointed. I'm not sure that our president wasn't appointed, anointed, because we have a story that's come down about, they knew there was a couple people that said they were in meetings and they were told who's going to be the next president. And I have to call George Green, and he was on my show. So no, they picked the presidents for the next, 20, 30 years, and they're all related through Charlemagne. So what is really going on here? But back to you had so many points I wanted to
okay.
talk.
Let me
slow it down a
go.
little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let me go back to one thing where I was going with this, and that is that we're at a point where we have narratives that are conflicting. People don't know what's true, and yet there is a longing, an understanding that we're in this together. We need to learn how to cooperate. So the piece that I'm working on right now, and of course, I'm working with a number of people who are been looking at what we're calling the sane and sacred center. How do we get off the battlefield and onto a new playing field? And it goes back to the Declaration of Independence. And this is really talking about what you were just talking about, the sovereign. Who is the sovereign of our country? Well, the Declaration of Independence, and you can talk about slave owners and men and all of that stuff, but given the fact that it was 240-something years ago, it was that's where people were. It was a stretch for people. But the Declaration of Independence was truly radical, and here it was also influenced by the native peoples in the New World, by the way, in that the rights that it talks about were not granted by kings. Like the Magna Carta, that was a situation where the king granted the noblemen certain rights, but it was granted by the king. In the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, we have those rights. They're inalienable. They come from birth. So every human has those rights. They don't have to be granted by a king. And if you read the Declaration of Independence carefully, you'll see that the true sovereign of this country is we the people, the collective we the people. It's totally radical. Now, what's happened over time is that we the people have essentially abdicated that power, and it's been made a lot easier by nefarious forces that have taken that power away from us, whether it's corporate personhood or the Federal Reserve or all of these perpetrations against the will of the people. So at this point, we have to reassert what was in the Declaration of Independence and bring we the people together as a coherent voice. Now, if you consider that the 90% of us who are not sociopaths have certain virtues and values in common, whether we're Democrat or Republican, liberal or progressive, independent, et cetera, et cetera. And those values have to do with liberty. They have to do with transparency, honesty in government, justice, lack of tyranny, and equality of opportunity. Most Americans want all of that. But because we've been divided, like you talked about in these in these documentaries, because we've been divided into these two tribes, we've intentionally been divided so that we can't really agree and unite around the policies that would hold our governance and the institutions of society accountable. So I'm seeing my work and the work of the people I'm working with over the next several years is to lift us off the battlefield, to stop paying attention to the battlefield conversations and convene a new conversation that moves past the identity issues to the identical issues that we all share in common. Clean air, clean water, clean food, clean government.
So how do you get to the attention when there's so many distractions, and that the intention of somebody is to divide and conquer and keep subdividing till we're so polarized we're now family members against family members. It used to be tribes, and we're religions, and we're countries, and now, I have a brother I fight with. He's so indoctrinated into Trumpism, and he'll say everything that I say, and we, like I'll say, the trumpets are evil, and he'll say the Democrats are evil, the liberals, and it's just it's generated a bunch of name calling. So I love your ideals, and I agree with them, but it's like we've got a lot of noise out there, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. So how do you get people's attention? Plus, our population
we've reached peak noise. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just say two more things. They've been dummied down, and I think that more are. We all have sociopathic tendencies, but somehow these tendencies have been fired up, and they've now become dominant. Because I was listening to some things that my brother said, and it's like, when did you become so cruel and callous? Like he's become very narcissistic. And that's not the man, that's not the boy and the man that I knew before this era. And I hear that everywhere. And I know, Deborah, you might want to chime in. This isn't just a dialogue.
Chime in? What, about my family dysfunction?
I heard the chime, yeah. I heard that chime, yeah.
Yeah, it's that interesting. My phone chimed. Okay, because I know, and then we'll get back. Hold your space where you're at, because that's like some solutions, but let's still cathartic the problems, and then we'll get to resolutions. Go ahead, Deborah. Add your 2 cents.
I mean, I feel like we are where the country was right before the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anything else?
That's true. I mean, that's true that people have devolved into these tribes. But the thing is, looking at how did it happen, first of all, there's fear. There's fear that's been fomented. There's lies that's been fomented. We can go back to the Nixon administration. I'm going to track both political parties to see how we got where we are.
Okay, so the Nixon, people don't remember, he was Republican, right?
Yeah, and his administration spawned 3 very foul and evil things. First of all, one of his key people was, I'm blocking the guy's name because he was the guy that founded Fox News was one of, not Rupert Murdoch, but what was his name? Founded Fox News. That came out of the Nixon administration. Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld, who were involved in fomenting the Iraq War and in turning 9/11 into an opportunity to attack Iraq and create great destruction there. They got their start in the Nixon administration as well. Cheney, by the way, if you saw the movie Vice, which is very accurate, he had this idea called the unitary executive. And that's what you were talking about earlier, about how did the president get so much power? Well, that was Dick Cheney's wet dream. And Donald Bush couldn't pull it off, but Trump did. And then finally, there was the Powell Memorandum. Lewis Powell was later appointed to the Supreme Court, but he started out as a tobacco company lawyer, which gives you guilt by association. And he wrote something called the Powell Memorandum. Now, this is in the early 1970s. After Richard Nixon, a Republican, signed into law the Environmental Protection Agency and all of this, Lewis Powell wrote this memorandum to the chambers of commerce saying, businesses, you better wake up because they're going to regulate you to death. And so in the 70s, all of these very well-funded think tanks emerged as to how we can create a propaganda campaign to reverse this trend toward regulation. And the result of a very successful campaign, it didn't even take a decade, that in 1980 they were able to elect Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan had that famous saying, the most frightening words you ever want to hear, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So their entire platform was to deplatform the government, which happened to be the only recourse that people have to counterbalance the unmitigated, unchecked balance of money. And so in the 1980s, they sold trickle-down economics, which Swami's joke is that's why the people at the bottom are called peons. That's all just trickling down. What's trickling down? Oh, it's showers of gold is trickling down. Anyway, so and so throughout the 1980s, and it was a 12-year sojourn for Reagan and Bush Sr. to deplatform the New Deal and put in place this trickle-down economics where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So 1992 presidential campaign, and you may remember this vaguely, that James Carville, who was Bill Clinton, the Democrats' campaign manager, he kept saying, it's the economy, stupid, it's the economy, stupid, it's the economy, stupid. And so when Clinton tried to run on, these idealistic cultural issues, he was forced to run on the economy. And so when Clinton became president in 1993, what the Clinton administration was establishing trickle-down economics from the Democrats' point of view and dismantling the social programs from the New Deal. So under the Clinton watch, the Glass-Steagall Act was abolished, and that's what kept the banks, really, really speculative financial institutions from polluting the banks. And all of these other scandals that occurred, the financial meltdown of 2008 had to do with these highly speculative, highly leveraged economics instruments, essentially destroying the real economy by giving loans to people who are not qualified, making a lot of money on the front end, and then leaving the debt to be handled by the rest of us. So it was Clinton and then later Obama who actually institutionalized a lot of these policies that
didn't we have Bush 1 and Bush 2 in there? We're not doing this.
Yeah, well, Bush 1 was in there from 89 to 93 when Clinton became president.
Clinton.
And then
he was there for 8 years, and then Bush took over.
Yeah, Bush 2 beat Gore, and again, by that time,
what did he do?
Bush 2 authorized no interest mortgages, and that's what firelit the destruction of the economy the last time.
Right, of course, it was a group effort, but first Clinton had to abolish the Glass-Steagall Act, which allowed those financial institutions to begin to infiltrate the real the banks that you and I deal with, the consumer banks and the commercial banks. And when Obama was elected and he bailed out Wall Street instead of Main Street, he had the opportunity. He had a bully pulpit. He had a majority in Congress. But by that time, the electoral system was such that both political parties were indebted to the moneyed interests to get elected. And that's when the Democratic Party stopped being the party of the working people and the poor people, and it became the party of the technocratic elites. And so the deplorables, those populists who voted for Trump instead of Clinton, many of whom voted for Barrie in the primary, by the way, the populists who voted for Hillary, and who voted for Trump instead of Hillary, these are people who were basically disenfranchised by the globalist economic moves made by both the Clinton and Obama administrations, and recognized if you read Thomas Frank, What's the Matter with Kansas, in his more recent book, talking about how the Democratic Party went for the money and abandoned the people. So that's where we stand. We have two political
is there anybody
parties
for the
that
people? Is there anybody who speaks for us? Because it doesn't seem like either side really gives a damn about us.
There's a new political party that's being born here in California called the Common Sense Party, of an associate of mine, Michael Maxenti, who is he's a Republican who worked on the Marianne Williamson campaign for Congress. So he's transpartisan. And this is they want electoral reform. They want to establish, they want to take money out of politics. They want to institute ranked choice voting, where you can vote for your first choice, and if that candidate doesn't get a majority, then it defaults to your second choice, and some have a third choice. So, for example, in the primaries, in the Democratic primaries, you could have voted for Bernie Sanders and then perhaps defaulted a second choice to Elizabeth Warren, or a third choice to Joe Biden or whatever. But that way, third-party candidates and candidates that represent a necessary but minority point of view can be heard, so that their viewpoints can be integrated into a platform. Right now, we have politics. Joe Biden was chosen before anything started. This was all chosen prior. I think you mentioned that earlier.
Well, it's all
so
just,
everything is it's all a charade. It's a charade.
And that's why the whistleblowers that came forth, and they said they already know who's going to be the president for the next 10 or 20 years. There's really no election, and it's just a bunch of show. And how better to have a
right
controlled
now, that's how it is.
when they don't realize they're enslaved.
The remedy is what we're calling the Great Uprising. And the Great Uprising is a critical mass of the uncritical masses waking up and wising up to see how they've been hypnotized. Now, we're not talking about the people that go to Trump rallies, although these people recognize it too. Last year, as I traveled around the country, I made it my point to speak with a lot of young conservative men, the people that go to Trump rallies. And my pitch was, the oldest political scam in the world is divide and conquer. And we have been intentionally divided into two political tribes that can't talk with one another, so that we can't gather around the virtues and values that 90% of us share in common. And the answer I got 100% of the time was, wow, you're right, that's true. So this is from Trump supporters.
I'm part of this radio station, and I go in the chat, and they won't hear anything other. There's 97 hosts, so they represent a lot of people around the planet. They're all over the world, and they won't hear anything but Trump is God. I can't even begin to have a dialogue about we have been divided and conquered. It's like, what in the world is going on?
Here's the secret.
We can't even have a dialogue.
Here's the secret. The only way to have a dialogue, and this is why social media is so damaging, because it's allowed us to turn the other person into a caricature. If you're having a conversation face to face, it's much harder to do that. I've been involved. There's two organizations that have put together these conversations to rehumanize one another. It's not about changing minds. It's about changing hearts. Braver Angels is one of them. I interviewed Bill Doherty, who's the founder of that. Living Room Conversations, that's another one. Joan Blades from Move On. John Gable, a conservative journalist. And these are both designed to rehumanize people by having them meet face-to-face. Even over Zoom, you're still better able to rehumanize. If you're talking on the phone or sending somebody an email, much harder.
Okay, so how do you get them to agree to show up for the conversation? That's where I'm stuck at.
First of all, you find the people who are willing first. In other words, the people who are most invested in the polarization, they're going to be the last to be part of this conversation. We want to find the 70% of people. So what we're looking at doing, we're calling it an ecosystem for civic engagement. And there's three main programs in this ecosystem. One is the escalating the programs that now exist, Greater Angels and Living Room Conversations, to really accelerate those people. Folks, if you don't like the polarization, 70% of people at least say they don't like the polarization. Great. Then you are the constituency we're looking for. Yesterday,
so how are you finding those people who don't like polarization? Are you doing any kind of social media networking? Because right now we're not traveling, except Deborah's traveling. She's brave. I wouldn't want to do that. But how do you find these people that are so polarized? And now we have COVID.
These are just,
we can't.
We're just beginning to do this. This is just beginning. But I'll give you an example. Yesterday, my wife Trudy and I went to the bank to look about refinancing our auto loan. And so we know the bank manager. He's only been there a year, and we like him. We've had long conversations with him. He and I like to talk baseball. He's a very smart guy, young guy, in his 30s. Well, this time, and we had to be wearing masks during this conversation. Don't get me started. But anyway, we had a 90-minute conversation, and we were there after the bank closed. That somebody else had to let us out, and the conversation was about this. It was about politics. He said, "I've been a registered Republican, a registered Democrat, and now I'm a registered independent. I don't like what I see going on." And the long conversation was about how excited he was and how relieved he was that there was the beginning of something that was going to create a sane and sacred center to take us off the battlefield, which has our attention, and put us on a new playing field. Not everybody's going to get off the battlefield. So instead of finding the people who are most entrenched in the trenches, let's go for the people who say that they're fed up. And let's bring those people together in conversation. I just previewed a new movie that's coming out, a documentary that's coming out in January called The Reunited States of America. And this couple with 3 children from Texas, he worked as a Republican operative doing essentially dirty tricks. He decided that he wanted to quit that he really saw the light, and what he wanted to do was to travel around the country and bring people together in dialogue to make up for the polarization that he had caused in his work. And the documentary follows him and his wife and their 3 children. It also focuses on the mother of the woman who was killed in Charlottesville by the driver that rammed into the crowd of demonstrators. It also follows an independent candidate for governor from Kansas. It also follows a young millennial whose parents were immigrants from India, who has formed this transpartisan millennial group that's bringing together legislators from both political parties into conversations for how do we really cooperate to solve problems and actually face the issues that we're facing. So these things are going on, but you will not see them publicized in the mainstream media. You will not, because the mainstream media is tied to keeping the polarization going and keeping the basic propaganda machine that's been put into place. See, here's where the Trump people are right. Okay, when I did my research and I watched the Social Dilemma and really looked at this, and really after the 2016 election, I decided that I'm going to talk to people who voted for Trump. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to find out, why did you vote for Trump? My friend in Michigan who voted for Barrie in the primaries voted for Trump against Hillary. Why did you do that? He lost all his friends in Michigan, by the way, except for me. Why did you do that? And so I began to educate myself and recognize that just as surely as they have toxic stereotypes of what liberals are like, we have toxic stereotypes of what they're like. And they are as terrified of a collective, a dictatorship by the collective, as we are of a dictatorship by one individual. And the fastest growing political movement in the world right now is the movement against mandatory vaccinations.
Can I put you on pause right there? We're going to pick up vaccinations, but our other person has arrived, Barrie. I think this is Barrie. Let me make sure. Because he's brilliant, and we're going to have a really good dialogue here. Okay, hold on. Barrie, is that you?
No, but I am solution-oriented.
Oh, it's not Barrie.
I have solutions if you want to have them. Otherwise, we can keep being conquered and divided and controlled.
What's your name?
Hugh Trolson. You know me, Janet.
Oh, I met you years ago online.
Yeah, and there's a lot more documentation that is available, and I have ways to go take care of these global elites, these hidden monsters that have been doing this for centuries to us. So
what's your solution?
I'll give you some. And are you in New York or from New York?
Me, I spent my deformative years in New York, but I'm in Berkeley right now.
Okay, and
I'm in New York.
Okay, because I'm from New York.
You?
I'm currently in Virginia,
Deborah.
but I'm sorry?
We lost Deborah. She'll call back in.
Yes, I want to give a YouTube interview that was done with a gentleman who I'm interacting with that does most of the social media on the internet on my behalf, and he's a cyber security expert, so you can share that and then come back to me if you have my phone number.
Hugh,
I'm sorry?
Before we get into I want to kind of.
Yeah.
Are you a Democrat, Republican, or Independent?
I'm neither, and that's the problem. Everything is corrupt.
Okay,
everything has been corrupted on both sides. And I want to give you this big website. You'll see it in the interview that I'm telling you about. But I was written up in a front page Wall Street Journal in 1983. It triggered an investigation that eventually led to the resignation of Jim Wright from Speaker of the House in shame. The article back then beautifully described how special interests and lobbyists have totally corrupted Washington. It was before Ross Perot talked about it. But due to apathy and people not knowing.
We'll put that in the description. What is the website, and because I want to kind of stay where we were and not go too far off.
I want to keep you on there, but I also want to know
we want to we're going to go the last hour into solutions.
Right.
We are getting into the last hour, but we're still identifying the problem. And so there are two things that we need to talk about besides the overall political arena, which we know is very corrupt and, has it been that way all along? It goes back, to Rome. All the roads lead to Rome.
Exactly.
And how can we get a better system? So that'll be the last part of the show. But I'm still identifying problems. So I wanted to ask Steve, and let's talk about, there's two main issues. The vaccine, no vaccine, and the mask, no mask. So we're going to, Steve, you said we don't talk about both sides of the issue, but you've been addressing both sides of some of the issues here. And the one comment you made about there's good and bad on both sides, that just kind of, I don't know, that just kind of negates anything good or bad on both sides. There's good and bad. I don't know. I don't like that comment. It's just, it's like yuck. Yeah, I can't say we're not. But let's go back to some logic behind. So do we have a pandemic or don't we? That's what some people know. There's no pandemic. There's nothing happening. It's all bioengineered. The Chinese launched it on us. If you go back to the Anunnaki, viruses were released in Pandora's box. And then there's stories of biochemical warfare going back thousands of years. The Dark Ages, these agents went on the fields and they would spray the fields, and then the next day the village would have the plague. So we have stories of this going on for centuries. So let's just put this to the panel. Do you think that this plague was manufactured, and who manufactured it? And, what do you think? Let's start with
I have
Steve.
no idea.
Okay.
I've talked to Meryl Nass. I've talked to a number of people who have different points of view about it. Meryl Nass believes that it has every marker of a bioengineered weapon. There's credible evidence that it came out of Wuhan, and that Wuhan was where we when during the Obama administration, there was a directive that prohibited us from developing these. What's the term? I want to say there's a technical term for how you make a virus stronger, so that you can either study it or you can use it as a bioweapon. So it was banned here, and that research, our research, shifted to the laboratory in Wuhan, China. Now, here's where it gets really, really messy. It's that because the mainstream media has not really been willing to have a conversation where these facts could be aired publicly, and instead they've imposed a narrative and censored all of the other ideas. It means that disinformation can be infused with good information, and people can believe all sorts of things. So my philosophy, based on my friend Caroline Casey, believe nothing, entertain possibilities. So I'm not a microbiologist. I'm not an immunologist. I'm not an expert. I haven't dove deeply into this enough to say anything except that we had a narrative imposed on us, and the people on the Trump side are resisting that narrative. Mark Crispin Miller, who to me is a credible journalist, he's done extensive research that shows that masks don't really work, and that they're essentially they can actually be damaging to the health. I've had other people who are experts on it who debunk that.
Yeah, we've been wearing masks for centuries. They had those ones that looked like a crow or something, like a bird in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. And then we had masks in the last century. I mean, I don't think there's a logic to it. If you have even a cold or you have a regular flu, if you go around sneezing and coughing on everybody, you should cover your mouth. So there's a logic.
People who have visited Japan and so on, and countries in the East, they say that they see people over the years wearing masks. Why are they wearing masks? They have a cold and they don't want to give it to somebody else. So if we look at the altruistic reason for wearing masks, we should all be wearing masks if it makes any difference at all. So in other words, if it, maybe it's not 100%, but if it makes a difference in a public place, wear the masks. Now,
I'm
over
here in Hawaii. I'm over here in Hawaii, and the Orientals that come through, and I go to Honolulu, they get off the plane, they're all wearing masks. And then every time I would be on a plane, I'd get off on the other end, and I'd get sick. It's like, well, maybe there's some logic on that. I'm breathing that air, and it's just got everybody's, little kids' diseases. Just like when you have a kid go to school. Those parents get more sick, more illnesses than other people, right? So there are diseases.
So I want to add something to this conversation, because this is the elephant in the living room. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Early on in the plague, I'm thinking it was probably April or May. I'm talking with a friend who's been a chiropractor for 40 years, and he was talking about an associate of his who, at that point, this is like in April, had already treated and cured 30 or 40 people with COVID using natural means. Zinc, vitamin C, other protocols. However, this person could not publicly share any of what he did for risk of losing his medical license. So I'm wondering how many of the 250,000 people who've died of COVID, and maybe they died of COVID and maybe they didn't, how many of those people that died of COVID could have been saved had they had an intervention available to them that has been deplatformed by pharmaceutical medicine. So this I'm 100% sure. I don't know what the origins of COVID are. I don't know.
Okay, so let me address what you just said there, because that was a lot you just said there. Yeah. So you're saying on some level, and this is part of the active measures, that they decided to destroy the United States. And the delivery method was COVID. And any ways of stopping the spread, that information, be it wearing masks or the vitamins you take, was repressed, so that this would be, the United States would have more cases than anybody, more deaths than anybody. It destroyed our infrastructure. We still, we're in the middle of it. We don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, except for vaccines, which is the next part of this discussion. So, was this intentional? Is it intentional? Is all this stuff that running around and having super events like 250,000 people at some monster bike thing, which wouldn't be a wise thing to do if it was just a cold or even a regular flu, right? Let's come and just spread this shit everywhere so we're all sick and missing work. But was that intentional? Did Trump intentionally spread all this disinformation so people would go out and sneeze and cough and yell?
No, I don't believe that for a second.
So you don't think so?
I don't believe that. I don't believe that. What I do believe,
like there's an ultraviolet supposed to cure it, and the zinc and C. We've all heard all this. Where was that?
It wasn't
also
Trump who was repressing all of that, by the way. It wasn't Trump who was repressing that.
Because I heard about it.
The Center for Disease Control. The Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization. One of the people I interviewed early on, probably April or May, was Andrew Saul, S-A-U-L, and he has for the last 40 years been a world-renowned expert on the therapeutic uses of vitamin C. And he was one of the people who developed the vitamin C protocols earlier this year that were used in Wuhan immediately. And so his website on vitamin C, his page on vitamin C was deplatformed by Facebook under the instructions of the World Health Organization. So I do believe that the World Health Organization, in association with Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation, is really pushing this vaccination mandate, and along with the pharmaceutical companies who are very, very, very deeply involved in the Center for Disease Control, what you're finding is that they're deplatforming any forms of medicine that can be spread freely without patents and so on. They want to eliminate the competition. Yeah, but
they've been doing that all along because our medical field has been monetized and there's somebody making profits, so that's why they, my brother and sister go to doctors and they're always getting pharmaceuticals. I said, I go after more natural things. What are you doing loading up your elderly bodies with pharmaceuticals that have you even Googled the side effects of what prescriptions are you taking? It's like I read some, I go, you don't even research that? That these people are brainwashed that you go to the doctor and the doctor's God. And so that's been going on for 100 years now.
This is the exact, by the way, this is very important. Yeah. This is very important that you're saying this because these are the brainwashed people on the progressive side. People on the progressive side.
One's Democrat. And they're both running to the doctor and doctor's God. And my sister called me. She's all doped up. She's in the hospital. She had a stroke. And I called her and I said, what the hell are you doing, my sister? She can't even talk. I don't think it's a disease. And they were giving her 3 Xanax or something. I go, she took it years ago and they gave her a quarter of a pill. You're giving her 3? What are you trying to do? See, if they get you in the hospital, they were trying to power you out. If you're old, you're over 60, they will try to power you out the door and onto the other side. See, this is the real evil of what's going on here. And that's why
I don't think you're exaggerating
by saying, the first round was, oh, you baby boomers, it's time for you to die because you're old anyway and you've got pre-existing because you're old. And it's like, what? And when did the world become so cruel? Really?
The world has become so cruel because of the lack of a sane and sacred center. That money has taken over as the god, and so money rules in every conversation. All of the decisions that we make, or primarily the decisions that we make politically, are based on money, based on the power of money. People that have money, they want this. That's what they're going to get. And so to say that, both political parties are corrupt, and that's why I think this was perhaps the most toxic election, in that all of the anger that people have toward the corrupt system was very cleverly turned one against the other. And that's the, if we're about to turn the corner here, start the new hour, we're now into the new hour where we're talking about solutions, then the solution begins with, first of all, get out of the conversation of having an opinion. Everybody has an opinion. The hell with opinions. Let's take those opinions and then begin to put ourselves through these already existing organizations like Braver Angels, Living Room Conversations, and the things that we're going to do with this new Sane and Sacred platform, is to bring people into conversations to rehumanize one another, number one, and then begin to explore solutions together. So I'm going to give you a 3-step program, three pieces to this new program. 3 new institutions of society that all become possible because of the internet, because of social media, where instead of being programmed by social media from the top down, we begin to use it from the grassroots up to rehumanize one another in conversation. So first institution I want to talk to you about is something called the National Town Square. There's a book, Richard Lang wrote a book called Virtual Country. And this is a project that we're now actively finding the conveners and funding to do this. Imagine a national town square where every registered voter in the country has given an advisory vote account that is as authenticated as your bank card, as bank card level authentication. So, number one, you're a real person. You're a real person. And only real people can appear on this. And then through your
can I ask
iPhone
something
or
about
computer.
the registered voters? Why don't we just do, I think it's Australia, when you're 18, you're automatically registered? Why make it all this other stuff? Just register, everybody. 18, you're registered.
I have no problem with that. I think that's a great idea. That's a really great idea. And this is one area where the Republicans are worse than the Democrats in that they want to keep people from voting. Not just dead people, but live people, particularly live people whose skin colors are darker, particularly those people. So that is true. And that's undeniable. That's an undeniable fact. But and of course, register automatically. That's great. Okay, put that in the parentheses. Okay, so imagine.
Okay, I'll put that there.
All registered voters in this country have an account with the National Town Square to have an advisory vote. Doesn't count, but it's an advisory vote on any issue. So what happens now is that every 2 years or every 4 years, you got to decide, do I want this lesser evil or that lesser evil? Neither of the two parties really represents what I think. In fact, here's something I really care about that both parties don't want to deal with, whether it's universal health care or whether it's electoral reform, getting money out of politics, all that stuff. So imagine what would happen if
so you're voting,
100 million Americans.
You're voting on things, and one part gets to impose their will on the others that lost. And Heinlein addressed that, Robert H. Heinlein. He said, what? We have these systems where you get to vote, and then you're imposing your opinion or your attitudes or ideas. Like the anti-abortion thing, that's actually a religious issue. We're supposed to have separation of church and state. But that gets imposed on people who want nothing to do with whatever the rule
Let me finish part one. That's in part three, okay? Part one.
Okay.
3 steps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so part one, National Town Square, everybody gets an advisory vote. 100 million people say, we want electoral reform. Then all of a sudden there's a bit of leverage on the elected officials because, first of all, not only do the elected officials get to see that, but then the people of this country go, you know what? Why do we need them? What do we need with them? We don't need those people. And, in fact, we can create pressure and make sure that at the next congressional election, those people that oppose these electoral reforms, we're gonna vote them out. Okay, so the National Town Square gives us a voice and a vote. It gives us a collective voice that where everybody is counted, only real people, no bots, no Russian bots or anything like that. Only real people are on that platform. Number one.
So how do they prove that they're a real person? What's your verification system? I thought that really the technology, we could have their eye scan and their fingerprint or something. There's some way to verify everybody.
That's right. We have that. We have that verification. The same as your bank card is verified. That's the level of verification. So first of all, we have the technology to match the voter with their registration wherever they are. So what this is going to do is if people want to participate in National Town Square, they're going to have to register as a voter. That's going to spur voter registration. So that's going to be verifiable. The person we have working with us is, somebody who's been involved with the head of cybersecurity for, I'm trying to remember one of the national security agencies that was established after 2001. So it's possible to do that. Okay, make sure only registered voters, only real people. Okay, so that's part one. Part two is a national conversation about our purpose, about the Declaration of Independence and the preamble to the Constitution. That is a huge conversation done through Zoom, done through these independent organizations that are not corporate, are not governmental, are not partisan, and are not connected with the mainstream media. Very important. Independent from media, independent from government, independent from corporations, independent from political parties. All of the institutions that have not established trust with us, we're eliminating those institutions and creating a trustworthy center where people know that the intention is to give people accurate, fact-based information and to bring people together in conversation where the people on different sides get to share their story. One of the most powerful pieces in the documentary, The Reunited States of America, that will be out early next year. The people, white people traveling across country to, really get the pulse. They're in, I forget what town, and they're talking with a black woman who lost her baby because she was neglected at the hospital because she was a black woman. And these people the wife of this begins to sob and hugs this woman and says, I never realized this. And the black woman says, I have never told this to a white person. The man, later on, in recalling this, says, I thought the race thing was handled. The guy I'm talking to yesterday, the bank manager we spent an hour and a half with, he said, I thought the race thing was handled. And then, began to educate himself. So when people get to hear one another's story, it becomes harder to deplatform them and dehumanize them. And then you begin to listen. People have to listen to one another. When you've already made up your mind about how it is.
You said that I thought the race thing was handled. Did you ask him what you mean by that? That's a big question. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've passed all these laws. We have a black president, Barack Obama. We have black people in commercials on TV. We see all these sports stars. We've integrated them. Not understanding what it means to be a black person. Who was I talking to yesterday? Oh, it's a bank guy. He said, I have a friend, who I went to college with and so on, black guy and so on. We're talking, and he says, he drives a Mercedes, right? He drives a Mercedes. So the black guy says to my bank manager friend, he says, how many times have you been stopped by the police this year? Guy goes, never. I don't speed. Black guy goes, I don't either. I've been stopped 15 times. Right. Is this your car? Is this your car? Black guy driving a Mercedes. Is this your car? Okay?
Right.
So it's very important It's very important, and I've seen this with it happened with sports teams after the Black Lives Matter thing. It happened with sports teams where, it's very intimate, and then finally the black players are telling their white teammates, "This is what it's been like for me," and the white guys are going, "Holy shit, I had no idea." Maybe they didn't want to have an idea, right? But the point is that the cat's out of the bag. And it's very important that these conversations not be conversations about imposing political correctness or wokeism, but rather people listening to one another. And people talking about themselves and how, if white people are talking about how they're racist, in fact, there was one video where Oprah and this African American football player, kind of ganging up on this white guy who goes, "I don't want to go walking alone in a black neighborhood." Well, I grew up as a white kid in an all black neighborhood, so I know what that's like. I didn't know what it was like to be a black person. When I was a kid, I knew what it was like to be a white person in a hostile environment.
Right.
I knew that.
So,
and since that time,
for that,
the
go ahead.
solution
Finish
for that
your story.
is heart-to-heart,
heart-to-heart,
face-to-face conversations where people listen to one another's stories, and the people who've had, when I left the neighborhood, I was just a white kid. I didn't have to join gangs like my friends, and they went to jail. I didn't have to join a gang. I knew if I survived till I was 18, didn't get stabbed or nothing, I would survive and I'd do okay. So I knew how to avoid trouble.
Well, let me give you a little.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say, same thing when. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I used to have to drive to the north side, which was totally black, to go pick up my husband, my first husband at H.J. High. And I took this side street, and the kids, all the little black kids playing on the street, and they would throw little pellets at my car. And I'm going, oh, shit.
Yeah.
So I would just go, dive, hunker down. Okay, I'm going to get through this. Hopefully we won't get damaged. Anyway, so it's kind of, racism's been around for a long, long time, and we've had to deal with it. But I, at a certain point, said, I'm getting out of this black and white city, Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania in general, and I want to go see diversity. So I moved to Hawaii. So I ended up in Oahu, and it's all Asian. And some people thought, oh, isn't she cute, the little white girl? Oh, come on over here. It was like reverse racism. We want you over here because you are the only white person. And then sometimes it was like, oh, you're disgusting. Why? You're pretty. I said, well, you're pretty too, but you're white. All you people look different. There's this Asian girl. It was like, oh, my God, I couldn't believe the racism. So then I moved to Maui. Now, Maui has, about 40% white, 30% Polynesian, 30, most people are brown or black here, most. And you know what? It's like, I know this sounds really weird. It sounds like a cliche, but I don't notice people's color so much because everywhere I go, everybody has color, right? And there's mixed couples. So the answer is, like we had back in the day, we integrate our neighborhood somehow, but it's this whole caste class system and the monetary system that keeps us divided, and so we have to redo our money system, and that's why the basic minimum income and the basic minimum needs society would level the playing field if we would all be equal in terms of our needs met, cap on personal wealth. There's no reason to have, we're going to have trillionaires soon. Trillionaires. We have people starving, and we're going to have trillionaires. There's no reason. So if you look at it like an alien species coming and looking at this planet and go, what are these people doing? They're starving. millions and billions of people, and then they have these rich people that they're hoarding. That's a mental illness. They're greed. Hoarding is a mental illness. So somehow
I agree.
leveling the playing field. So that's one of the solutions, and integrating it so that every city I once saw a movie, and you didn't know where the people were coming from. They were in Rio de Janeiro, and that was a ultra modern city, and everybody's mixed races. And so if you have ultra modern, desirable places for people to live, and you have a big database of here's where you can live, and you can rotate where you live. You want to go live in south of France, everything's in the database, all the properties, and you can, do the house swapping. Remember that? That was popular. So nobody really misses out on having opportunities to travel and to diversify. So diversification of our populations, and traveling is one of it. But we've got to get over COVID. We've got COVID, whether it's real or fabricated. People are, we have 250,000 people dead as of yesterday. Is that real? Is that illusion? That's why I used to really be focused on all this, what do you call it, conspiracy stuff. And I just went one day, I said, this is all bullshit. There's no way to know any of it's real because it's just so full
That's
of
right. That's exactly correct.
disinformation.
And
so I threw it all out.
I don't know. Yeah.
I went, is it kind
really...
or loving? Is it kind or loving, yes or no? If it's not kind, not loving, I'm not going down that road. I'm not going down that spot. You have to.
And that's what we mean about moving off the battlefield onto the playing field. When you're off the battlefield, you're not denying anything. You're not denying anything. You're much more able to see the truth, whatever that is, rather than being pulled into a polarizing narrative. I don't know whether it's real or not real. I don't know whether they're lying about the figures, whether the figures have been intentionally twisted, any of these things. I don't know. But the point is that the best way for us to move forward is to know together. So step one, a national town square where everybody has an advisory vote so that the pulse can be taken instantly and have it be more verifiable than the voting results we have now. Number one. Number two, a national conversation during this 4-year transitional presidency, a national conversation about our national purpose, something that's bigger than every individual that will ultimately benefit every individual, not something that's imposed down through political correctness or legislation, but something that is recognized from the grassroots up. When we begin to remove fear, people become more willing to cooperate and collaborate. When there's a situation, ironically, when there's an emergency situation where people must cooperate and collaborate, lo and behold, that's what they do. So we're in an emergency situation now, not just because of the COVID, but we're in an emergency situation in that we don't have a center that we can trust. Our institutions are so untrustworthy and been made untrustworthy from people who benefit by our confusion, by our division, by our country imploding, like you suggested earlier. People that benefit from that. So what we have to do as the American people is we have to convene something that has never been convened. The true sovereign of this country is we, the people. That's the true sovereign. We, the people, acting in accord. You know, a king, a true king, rules by inference, not by force. A number of years ago, the king of Thailand said, we need more trees. Millions of trees were planted after he said that statement. He didn't demand it. He didn't, at gunpoint, you're going to plant trees. No, he is a sovereign who is the healthy central voice of that country, saying our country needs more trees. I happen to be the human that represents that. I'm saying we need more trees, and lo and behold, the people did that. When we, the people, speak in one voice, we become the sovereign, and the republic, res publica, thing of the people, the government that is of the people, that is designed to rule us by in a just, honest, transparent, and in truthful way. That's what we're going to get. The next level of human evolution is recognizing that we're all cells in the same body. The next level of our political evolution, the evolution of revolution, is recognizing that we the people are the leaders we've been waiting for, and when we find ways to have our voice heard through the national town square, to speak together through these conversations that rehumanize and reweave this web of understanding. And then finally, when we use the tools that we have, Jim Ruff has created this tool called Wisdom Councils. There have been many, many organizations in the dialogue and deliberation field that have developed technologies to bring people together to solve problems together. And when we take our attention from staring each other down to looking at a problem from our separate perspectives that we're not trying to convince one another about, you're right, I'm right, you're wrong, but instead are listening to hear the truth in the other person's perspective and new information that will enable people to work together to solve problems instead of fighting over isms.
Let me ask you something, or let me interject something here. So one of the problems that I'm a problem solver, and I look at systems and systems analysis, and what you have are some good foundations, and I'd like to flesh that out a little bit more to operationalize it, like what's the ABCD that each person can do, begin right now in their home. But one of the things that I noticed is that would eliminate, a lot of the problems is term limits. Like appointing somebody, I think 8 years is too long. My opinion is 4 years max for like any political or even the the POTUS, the SCOTUS, right? Anything doing with any position of great power, 4-term limits, 4-year limits, and rotate them out. So that doesn't mean you can't come back, but you can't come back immediately. So you rotate out. You might go down to some lower level, the city level or the state level, be a governor for a while, go back and become the dog catcher for a while. I mean, to make it go, this thing go beyond the person, but the position. And you need to be qualified to be in the position, right? You can't have somebody that's I think they had a wrestler who became governor. I mean, there's no, what kind of qualifications do these people have for these positions? And they have to know what they're doing. I guess they're supposed to rely on their cabinet. So someone that comes in like a dictator and just playing the apprentice and you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. He's not honoring the intention of a president has a cabinet. And, that's the dialogue with the cabinet, all the cabinet members, and how do we do this? They're supposed to have a dialogue, not just a plutocrat, an autocrat. It's just dictating.
Can I address the term limit?
Yes.
Term limit idea. Okay, here's the failure point there. The biggest problem that we have right now is the revolving door between people in office and then lobbying the industries that they help support, and vice versa. So there's a revolving door in appointed positions and also in congressional positions. So when somebody, in fact, Dick Cheney, there's a perfect example. When he, I think he ran for, he was a congressman for a while, and then he left that, and he became, I forget the company that he worked for, one of the evil companies that he worked for. What happens, the real issue is this revolving door. So term limits don't really handle that because, okay, I spent my 2 or 4 or 8 years doing the bidding of this corporation, and now I'm being rewarded by a big job. Perhaps a better approach would be to really, really look at public service as public service. Public service. That in the service
you don't make it something that someone could get in there like a king or a dictator and I mean, look at some of these people, that have been there for 8, 10, 20 years, and they just think they own the place, but they don't. They are, what do you call it? They need to honor and respect the positions that they're in, not using that as an opportunity to launch themselves into making more and more money. And that's the problem being in there a long time, because they start lining their pockets.
But as you said earlier, the real issue is a society where money is number one. And so if you don't go for the money, people treat you like a fool. Somebody else is going to do it. Why don't you do it? And that has been the so-called morality in this country for many years. And we are now reaping the results of that.
Well, we used to be more caring in the 60s. We were like, I want to contribute to the world. We went to the Peace Corps. What are you doing? More humanitarian, more caring, more conscious. So we went through something, the yuppie years, and then we started making money our God. And so it will balance if we have money for everybody, so you have no poor, eliminate the poor, reestablish the middle class, and eliminate the uber rich. You can have some people who have nice mansions, but nobody needs to have billions and billions of dollars while people are poor. And that's what I would do if I were an extraterrestrial coming in and saying, how do we help humanity? It's like, well, here's what we do. Now, how do we put any of these things into place?
Here's a plan, and with a national town square, this is something that's possible. Okay, Scott Smith, he's been in the financial industry for 35 years or longer. He was one of the people who headed up the reform programs after the savings and loan scandals in the late 1980s. He was engaged by Nelson Mandela to help the new South Africa develop their monetary system. And for the past bunch of years, he's been working on something called the Financial Freedom Act. And I've interviewed him on my show, and I'm sure he'd be happy to appear on your show. Financial Freedom Act, what he figured out is that if we eliminated the income tax and we taxed only digital financial transactions, trillions of dollars in speculative transactions take place every day. If we were to tax them at a very small percentage, he figured that this would generate $15 trillion a year. This would be enough to handle the budget that we currently have without income tax. It would allow free medical care for everyone. It would allow paying off the national debt, and it would allow a $25,000 guaranteed income for everybody in this country. It would eliminate, and there'd be no limits to what you could make, okay? So It would eliminate forever. It would eliminate forever the conflict between capitalism and socialism, because everybody would be guaranteed $25,000 a year, individual. Families would get more. So there's no penalty like welfare. There's a penalty for working.
Right.
There's no penalty. So if you want to work, I'm getting $25,000 a year. I can make more. There's no penalty for making more. And guess what? The more that I'm making is not being taxed.
Yeah, that's only kind of covering.
People are going to want to work. They're going to want to
their
serve.
needs.
Yeah.
They're going to want to work and get luxuries, and so we need to meet a basic minimum needs economy. So, it could be variable based on the city or town, but and then that whole thing, why do we have some cities cost $5,000 for an apartment and the other one costs $500, right? So there's such a variation on what it costs to even live in a city, and cities are have the basic needs all the way around. what makes it so they're more desirable? I guess is what makes it. Maybe it's climate. I don't know. New York's cold. I don't know what makes one city cost more than the other. People desire to live there because of whatever. So we need to look at the whole economic system and do something like that. So you're saying that they would tax all digital transactions.
Yeah.
And what about there'd be no more cash, or you would still be able to?
No. You can use cash. People can use cash. The cash will be fine. But the way that the taxes work would be a tax on digital transactions, which are happening everywhere. A lot of these, by the way,
digital
on people trading, stock trading, day traders, all of that sort of stuff. Speculative transactions. Speculative. So what?
So that isn't your purchases at the grocery store. This is
No, nothing like that. No, not at all. No.
So what are digital transactions? Let me. What do you consider digital transactions? So you say the stock market?
Stock trading, day trading, all of these things where people are buying and selling things. Not your shopping at the grocery store. No.
Okay, so
nothing.
No tax on your
nothing.
Your regular no tax,
and
no
then
income tax.
And the entire income tax thing goes away. It all goes away. No more income tax. And everybody gets $25,000 a year based on those figures. So people can continue to speculate, but we become the house in this gambling operation. We get the percentage from their gambling. And
I like that.
Of course you like that. Everybody likes that. Nobody doesn't like that,
is that
unless they're invested in the system as it is.
Put that on your website. Is this on a website? Yeah.
Yes. I'll send you the link to it.
People. Okay. Because if we can educate people on these new systems that we're proposing, then humans, once we wrap their minds around something, they can do something about it. But if it's just a bunch of words in the air, and they can't quite pull it down into earth and manifest it. So we need to give them something to wrap their minds around, to pull it down, because we're co-creating this reality, and we can make it something better that works for everybody. Right now we have a win-lose reality, and there's a lot of losers. Yep. So $25,000 a year income gets people off the streets. Everybody needs to be out of the streets and having their needs met for food and shelter and education up to, I don't know, why not all the way up to PhD level? That wouldn't we benefit by having a highly educated society?
He said, I'm sorry, free college. Free college is included in that. I forgot to mention it.
Free college.
So free college. So that eliminates what this does. And since you've studied, financial systems, and you understand that debt is slavery, and that we have a system of slavery where everybody is indebted to the country store, so to speak. And this debt slavery, the young people who are paying off or not paying off their college debts, the people who have medical debt, trying to pay that off. This eliminates that entire debt system. Students are not, when you're done with college, you're ready to get started with something that makes a difference. What happens is all of the things that people don't want to do, all of the jobs that they don't want to do, that are probably not really beneficial because they're predatory, and that's why people don't want to do them, they don't have to do them. When you get out of school, you're not forced into a golden handcuff slavery system where you have to take this job or else. And then maybe later on you'll do your heart's desire, or you'll do your service in the world.
So what do you mean by what are some examples of predatory jobs? I mean, who's going to pick up the garbage? How do we get?
Well, the thing is that picking up the garbage is not a bad job. In other words, it's nothing wrong with that job. It's a matter of how humanized things are. I mean, I pick up garbage. I've done menial work. and
maybe
that's all of that stuff. Maybe there's other forms of national service where you can get a couple of years of free graduate school by doing this job or that job or the other job.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have right now is there is no moral center to our country. There's no leadership. We have no leadership. Leadership is what will be leading.
There's a good thing. So that's what Trump's been accused of. No moral center. I mean, the man gets up and makes fun of handicapped people, and it's like bully. It's like a junkyard bully, right? It's like always calling people names. And so that would just disqualify. If I worked at a job and I went around and called people names, I'd be fired, right? Just put it in normal human terms. You can't go around making fun of people when you're working a real job. So somehow that fear of getting fired keeps you civilized, right? So there's nothing to rein in a dictator, a despot who just goes up and then what really was a folly is the people applauding it. Oh yeah, that's great, the guy. Oh my God! It was like watching like the Romans throw people to the lions. It was like, what? Where did we get to that type of country where we have those kind of people that rise to leadership? So
there is a collective mental. There's a collective mental illness that feeds, and the mental illness.
Well, we need to look at that stuff. We need to have people that look at this society, and you're talking about morality. How did we get so perverse? What happened?
Well, I would track it back to November 22nd, 1960. I would track it back to November 22nd, 1963.
So that's where you think it began with the assassination of Kennedy.
Right. I think
that's coming up in a few days.
Because of the perpetration, and it was covered up. Because of that perpetration, we lost. It's kind of like, imagine in a family there's a perpetration, similar to what happened in the Catholic Church with the pedophile priests. That there's a level of betrayal that is so profound that it requires a level of healing that nobody did. In Germany, after World War II, because there was a reckoning at Nuremberg where these things were exposed, the German people had to take a look at that shadow piece. They had to be aware of it. They were aware of it. They had to acknowledge and accept that that's what their country did. We have never been held accountable for anything, not for slavery, not for the destruction of the native peoples here, not for the false flag at 9/11, not for the Kennedy and King assassinations, which were, I'm convinced by the evidence that I do feel more certain about these things, that they were perpetrated by elements in our own government. But because we've been in denial about that, just as surely as denial in a family system causes huge dysfunction and causes people to act out in very toxic ways, the body politic in the two separate tribes each has their own toxicity. There's a toxicity of this meanness on the Republican side that's been cultivated since my friends in Washington, D.C., when I used to live there in the 70s, when Reagan became president in 1981, they would tell me things have gotten very mean. Lee Atwater worked for George Bush Sr. in his campaign. Meanness. So on that side, they've cultivated meanness. There's a reason why in 2000 the color red was attributed to the Republicans and blue to the Democrats. It's to emphasize that side is controlled by anger. That side is manipulated by anger and fear. The blue side
Right.
is manipulated by political correctness, by refusing to be involved in conflict when conflict is necessary. So just as Trump is contesting the election now, the Democrats had much better case for contesting in 2000 and 2004, and instead they gave in. They gave up. The
right.
Democrats
Gore
never
said he
defended.
did it because Gore was on recently, and he was reminding us that he got called on his shit why he did that, and many of us have forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently it was, he said it was for the good of the country to just move on. But so we're at the same point now. We have a president that has all these crimes he's committed, so there's the lack of morality, and it goes down into, all the stuff he's done. He's raped women, and all that got pushed. Just like my neighborhood
Janet,
had rapists in my neighborhood.
Wait.
Yeah.
Hold on. That lack of morality is on both sides. That is not just one side.
But I'm saying he's been called on his shit because he took when you take the highest office in the world, you are on display and all your shit's displayed. I mean, I could be a low-level person in my neighborhood and get away with stuff all my life and never have to face it. But when there's a level of moral responsibility when you take on the leadership of the world, and so your dirty laundry gets aired. That's why they can criticize the politicians at the top, and you have problems if you do that with people down below. So we have this point where we could do the same thing like the Nuremberg trial, where we're going to air our dirty laundry. And this dirty laundry of an individual is actually for the entire country, because this shit's been going on at all levels. My neighborhood was full of perverts, and I had people up on my couch that were raped by priests, right? And I have interviewed, or I had done therapy with so many women, and almost 95 or 97 or % have been raped. They've been molested. And then you have the boys and the men, and there's so many people. So this is a national thing that's going on, and it's been hidden. But then we have it manifesting in the President of the United States. There's 26 cases. And we had Epstein. I don't think Epstein's dead. and we had Weinstein. So this has happened in the last 4 years. Those people came up.
Well,
Epstein
was chums with Hillary and Bill.
Interestingly,
we're doing it. But and so
Google
QAnon is
Epstein,
looking at that. That's what QAnon's about.
Well, QAnon's some bullshit. Epstein, when you Google Epstein, and then you'll see him, who is he with? It's for some reason the only picture comes up with him. He's not with Bill and Hillary. He's with Donald. So anyway, so that's just
that's a popular picture now. Popular picture.
That's a popular picture. Okay, so we need to look, and that's just one issue. And, we're going to look at our country is like a bunch of mafiosos, right? And that's what that Active Measures video says. The main reason that Trump got together with Putin was to create an international money laundering scheme. Because all these political positions are feeding into the money that ends up, Putin's probably the richest man on earth. Did you know that? I didn't know that. It ends up at the top. And that's their goal. Well, if we don't allow hoarding and one person to have that much money, then that kind of goes away. Maybe you can only have 50 million. I don't know. Some kind of cap, one person alone. But I think we should bring on the Nuremberg trials. So there's a debate now. And Biden, I think, is caving in once again. It's in the blue political record. I don't want my presidency to be all about, trying Trump and this and that. But I think trials are going to go on, and it might be good for the nation to air our dirty laundry, and maybe we can move past it and do something nice for each other. That's my opinion, but what do I know?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, you can count on the Democrats to do the wrong thing. You can count on them to do the wrong thing.
Apparently,
that's
it's not
the
up to
wrong
Biden.
Thing. They'll do it.
It's up to the private states where these crimes have been perpetuated, and they're going to, especially New York. And Donald didn't help himself by saying, "I'm not going to give you the vaccine." Okay. Well, we're going to take all these cases to the max. So, okay, we've got 5 minutes. Go ahead. I'll shut up, Steve. Take it away. And
No. I think this is a very. I could feel the frustration in our conversation. I could feel the frustration that most people in this country are feeling. People don't want to be alienated from their relatives. People do not want to, lose friends and lose family over this issue. What's happened is that we've been hypnotized, we've been brainwashed and mind-fogged. And part of the waking up from this is waking up to both that this is perpetrated on both sides of the aisle, and it's perpetrated for, the reason of domination. I tend to agree with your analysis. I think Trump and Putin are very much in league, in the oligarchs' league. They're total sociopaths, but the problem is that we have a sociopathic system. And so that's the elephant and the donkey in the living room, because it's both political parties. And there's no way that the system's going to reform itself. It's going to have to come from an independent force. And I probably told you in the next 5 minutes, I can tell you that one of the domains that I just bought is Independent Citizens United, or ICU. And that's a domain where we are looking to move past the political parties, because we need a citizens union. Back in the 1930s, somebody figured out that we need a consumers union, and they created Consumer Reports magazine to protect the consumer against, to let them know what are people saying about their products that are true and what's not true, And so the citizens of America need a neutral force. They need a press where both sides are aired, and the purpose of the moderator is, I want you to speak. I want you to speak. I may have some sharp questions to ask to get to fundamental facts, but I want to do that. Progressives, the progressive side, is afraid of having that conversation, so they've imposed a narrative that creates resistance. The mask may be
the dialogue.
The perfect.
We don't need to.
Yeah,
we don't need to have mainstream media to have the dialogue. We have the internet, and we start the dialogue, and the pros and cons.
Right.
But I just really apply the litmus: is that kind? Is that loving? So if we go down the line where we run around and we expose ourselves to virus, and then everybody dies, that's not very kind. Now, we need to back off and do the science and do the examination. What is spreading this? Is this mass hysteria and we're all just dying because, the sky is falling? Or is it a real phenomenon? And where did the research? Well, nobody's doing the scientific analysis about anything, or even gathering the data and the dialogue. Are we even going to do we even have a list of all the people that have died? Or are they in mass graves that somebody, 1,000 years from now is going to find and don't even know who these people are? They're buried on top of
How many people do you know who have died? How many people do you know have died of COVID?
I'm in Maui, and we're pretty good here. But I personally had a variation of this in 2018, and I almost died. And because I got sick in 2018, I was sick the entire 2019. I almost died in 2019. I spent 6 to 8 months of my life trying to figure out how to get my body back in shape so I could stay in form. So there's something going on. It's not bullshit, but we're out of time. Okay, we'll do this again some more if you want. But thank you so
we
much,
can pick this
Steve.
up
Thank you.
after the inauguration.
Okay, sounds good.
Or sooner.
Whatever you want.
I love all of you, and I hope this was
love
helpful.
Love you too, dear. Okay, blessings.
Okay.
Aloha.
Namaste.
Thank you, Deborah.
Namaste.
Thank
Aloha.
you for joining us. Aloha. Ha ha ha.
Okay. Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.